For today's welding tip, I'm going to answer probably one of the most asked questions I get asked about welding, and that is, I'm looking to buy my first welder. What should I get? Well, the reality is the first thing you have to decide is what type of welding are you doing? And are you just going to be working with steel and sheet metal, or do you want to have a machine that's going to be able to tackle any welding job that you have in your shop? Now, when it comes to tools, I sort of subscribe to that classic saying where it's buy once, cry once. So yes, a true multi-process welder like this ESAB Rebel is going to cost you a little bit more money, but it's going to possibly be the last welder you ever buy for your shop. And that is because this one machine is capable of performing MIG welding with both solid or flux core wire. So you might not need gas. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. You can TIG weld with it. This particular model, I can do AC or DC TIG. That means I'm able to weld steel, stainless steel, as well as aluminum. And it is also a stick welder where I can use it to weld just basically heavy, thick material with a arc welding rod with this stinger. That is possibly the best reason to get a multi-process machine. It's one machine, takes up a very small footprint in your shop, and you can do a whole bunch of different types of welding. And I'm going to show you all of them right now. We'll start with the MIG welder. MIG welding stands for metal inert gas welding, and it's a type of arc welding. So essentially what happens is we're inducing voltage onto this little wire that's coming out of the MIG welding gun, and when this wire touches the workpiece, we're creating an arc that's melting the material, and the machine feeds the filler wire from inside down through the gun to create the bead. The items you need to watch out for when you're MIG welding are you need to pay attention to how far away the torch is from the workpiece. So you want to keep about 3/8 to a 1/4 inch gap. That will give you good weld coverage with the gas that's coming out of the nozzle. You also want to make sure that the nozzle and the welding tip are in good condition because they can wear out over time. This is the easiest form of welding to learn. If you're just buying your first welder, MIG is where you're going to start, and this machine is a great way to do it. Now, let's look at TIG welding. TIG welding stands for tungsten inert gas welding. It's another form of arc welding. Now, the difference here is what we're doing is we are completing an electrical circuit from the end of this piece of tungsten between it and the workpiece. That's what creates the arc, causes the metal to melt. And then with our other hand, we're adding filler material into the molten puddle as we push the molten puddle along with the torch. At the same time, we're controlling the amount of amperage that's coming out of the welder with the foot pedal that's being run by my right foot. The beauty of TIG welding is it's a very precise form of welding because I have full control over the molten puddle. I can use my foot to make it larger or smaller. I can manipulate it with a torch, and then I control how much filler material I'm adding at a time with my other hand. It's a very difficult process to learn. It's time consuming. People who spend all day TIG welding are essentially welding artists. Their welds look absolutely beautiful. Now, the last process we're gonna look at is good old fashioned stick welding. Stick welding is kind of the original form of arc welding. Essentially what we're doing is we're inducing a voltage into this arc rod. These rods come in many different types of material, depending on what you're welding. It's specialized steel that's covered in this flux. The flux melts as we weld or create the molten puddle down the piece of work, and the flux will protect the puddle, and then when you're done, you gotta chip it off to see the weld underneath. It's possibly one of the most difficult types of welding to master, but it does have its place. It's probably the most portable type of welding. You can get arc stingers and wire to feed them up to 100, 200, 300 feet long. So essentially the welder could stay in the shop and I could take a ground clamp and a stinger and be 100 feet away, and all I need to weld is the arc welding rod. I don't need any gas, I don't need any foot pedals, nothing else. Most of the time, this stinger, once you put the electrode into the stinger, the electrode is live, and that's what makes it tricky. So you'd set this down on the table, and quite often it would short out and start arcing. The nice thing about this machine is it actually incorporates an on-off switch, so I can turn the stinger off and on, basically turn the knob, now it's live, I'm ready to weld. When I'm done welding, I just turn the knob back, it's off. That way I can set it down on the work table and it doesn't cause any arcs. One thing you do need to pay attention to when you stick weld is you wanna make sure you're actually wearing a good piece of fire-resistant clothing, because there's a lot of sparks that come off the arc stinger as well as you're welding. It's always good to wear the proper clothing when you're welding. And that's all you need to know. A multi-process machine is a great welder if you're shopping for your first welder. Takes up very small amount of footprint in the shop, and we can do all this type of welding whenever you need it. Then, just practice and do it a lot.
This Build for Off-Road Welding Tip of the Trade is brought to you by ESAB.